Yo, what it is, YouTube? It's your boy Nitsa coming back with another bullseye of a tutorial here today on the channel. I got a very old but still gold plugin that I want to go over today, the T-Rack Saturator. Let's talk about how these different units and these different types of modeling of analog components can help juice up your vocals and just juice up your whole track altogether in general, right? I believe the T-Rack Saturator has been my little secret weapon lately that I've been using a lot to just add more movement, add more weight and more density to a song without using EQ or anything like that. Just using my knowledge of the component. The T-Rack Saturator gives you kind of like a color palette of different, options, colors, flavors, and, various materials that sound would be run through back in the day, during the analog time. First tape is kind of like a bright tape that has a smoothing high end effect, right? It kind of gives off kind of like a, vintage kind of tape sound where you have the kind of like a 15 to 30 IPS, right? It has a decent high frequency response, right? But with this tape too, it kind of has a lo-fi sound to it. So it feels like a 7.5 IPS speed. And we have to remember that with tape, the IPS speed is pretty important because, that kind of determines the high frequency response. So the number 2 has a kind of like a poorer high frequency response. So that's why it kind of feels like a 7.5, right? Now, the very next thing that we have right here is 2 different types of mastering tape that have different saturation curves, right? And with these mastering tapes, they're soft saturation curves, but these are kind of all modeling what it would sound like if you were to drive into that tape, if you were to overdrive it. Some of the characteristics of what it would give you, some of that sauce and some of that vibe it would give you, right? I see the T-Rack Saturator kind of like if it was like English, right? Where you're speaking English, but all of these different modes are like people who all have different accents. They're all speaking the same language, but they all have different accents and different ways they articulate the message and get their point across. So that's just how an analogy I use to see all of these different modes. The next thing that we have is 2 different types of tube, one being a push-pull type of kind of like a overly stressed tube, right? A overdriven tube, then a kind of like a class A tube, which it kind of gives me like a Verimute tube kind of vibe. One thing I love to do on my mix bus processor, right, is I just love to use tubes, right, because it kind of gives the whole mix a forwardness. The reason why we perceive it as forwardness because it's actually adding more harmonic content and density to the mid-range specifically, right? So I love going with something like a 670 and cranking up the input gain a little bit and the output gain to get some of the sound of the tubes, right? And I love to just run it through, right? So sometimes you want to strategically pick a plugin just to know, hey, I'm just gonna let it run through. Then I like to use like something like a UAD pull tech, but no EQ, no nothing, just the sound of tubes. So you should be using the sound of these components to your advantage because it's gonna help you do less work. Okay, so you don't have to start boosting stuff when you have something that's going to naturally add some more of the sauce and some more of that good old flavor that we love without you having to go in there and overthink it. That's why I like using plugins in this way, because it's kind of hard to mess up. It sounds good, you run through it, and yeah, back in the day, people would always used to do this with analog as well. Sometimes they don't even use the unit, they just run it through. I have a real LA3 in real life, and the good thing about the T-Rack Saturator is also model solid state components, right? So with the solid state components, to me, I see it as a little bit more aggressive. Let's think about things like the SSL console, right? Which is mostly composed of solid state, components, and how it kind of gives us a snappiness, right? The push-pull is kind of like an aggravated kind of like VCA type of sound to me, in my opinion, right? Kind of think of like the SSLG compressor and how it has that cohesive factor, but it's still kind of snappy and bitey and a little bit aggressive. Is good for rock music and rap music, right? And then you have the API 2500, which is like another type of VCA compressor that has solid state components in it as well, that gives that very transparent sound, right? The tube is kind of a little bit rugged, but the definitely solid state is very transparent and very bitey. Lastly, we have the sound of 2 transformers, iron and steel. I'm not completely sure, but I definitely do have a theory that this plugin is actually modeling the input transformers of the Shadow Hill mastering compressor. Just look kind of how here the Shadow Hills, it gives us what, nickel, iron, and steel, and those are the sounds of the transformers that you get with that mastering compressor. But the good thing about the T-Rex is that you don't really have to go all the way to using a compressor when you can get it right here in a saturator that's already kind of like all in one, right? So with the transformer sound, I feel like it adds density, it adds weight. That's what the Shadow Hills mastering compressor is very known well for, right? Just making a whole mix feel like it gained 300 pounds. So that's why I love the T-Rex saturator. It's like a color palette, right? And I'm just pretty much like a painter, painting the different tones and the different types of styles in my music. And the good thing about the T-Rex saturator is that it gives you some extra options, right? Like you can, choose how hard you want to drive in there. You have up to 40 dB of drive, so you can really thwack into these plugins, right? Also, you get the options of a brick wall internal limiter, which prevents any digital clipping, so you can hit it hard but not get any of the digital sound, only some of that good analog juice. Then after that, we have oversampling for the people who love to do upsampling, just making it a little bit more better with the sample rate. And let's look at the T-Rex. Let's listen to the song, right? And the very first thing I want to point out about the T-Rex is how I like to use it on a 2-track beat. With a 2-track beat, you don't really have too much control, right? So I love to use things like saturators just to beef it up a little bit. That's what the mastering tape is very well for. It's just the overall oxide, right? The oxide particles and the sound of electrons. Literally, think about science. Electrons are things that are moving around here, up in there. They have a lot of energy, right? So that's what electrons bring to, audio signals. They bring more energy, more movement, more up, down, left, right. Oh my God, this song is just really feeling, like it's starting to become like a human being. Now I can make a connection with it, right? So let's listen to, like, for example, this part right here and how the T-Rex saturator helped it.
But if you use your head and close your eyes,
So in a situation like that, I feel like a sub bass is a great way to make it dramatic, to bring the listener in. But the sub bass wasn't hitting hard enough for me, right? So what I did is I actually pulled out the T-Rex saturator, which is one way you can use it to beef up a 2-track beat. And let's listen to how the sub bass became way more apparent. The added harmonic content in the high mids and the low mids made it feel just way bigger, but without adding any volume. That's the great thing about the T-Rex saturator. You have an instant level match right there. Pay attention. Listen to how it sounds way bigger and you can hear the notes. So that's one great way to use the T-Rex saturator to beef up the low end. Things in a situation like this, tubes are great for the low end and transformers are great for the low end. But just listen to how, the pluck and everything just sounds way better. And sometimes when you bring the beat into Pro Tools, you convert it down, whoop-de-whoop. You get it from YouTube. Some of the quality and some of the life in it can be lost, but you can bring it back with the T-Rex saturator. Another great way I like to use my T-Rex saturator, right, is to kind of use it in a summing fashion, right? I love to bring my mix all the way down to a few faders once I get my original balance. And with the T-Rex saturator, you have an amazing thing where, the transformer is just a great way to add some meat and some beef to a signal in general, So just listen to how the transformer, the sound of the iron, kind of added like a glue component to the vocals.
close your eyes and use your head and it's gonna be alright. I'm in prison waking up with constant blue and white. I was living reckless, never was I living life. I was smoking gas, now they got me smoking spice. Time, never do it seem to count. Why? Cover loss, can I be cloud stress? Let it get the best of me. I done lost 3 people in the year, I'm screaming rest in peace. I just wanna put my problem to the ceiling. Stay for everyone and then fuck all they feeling. With my money, yeah, with bills, tell her that I got it. Pull up in a brand new Benz, difference is I bought it. Niggas say I'm I'm overrated, overestimated. Damn, bro, if I make it, I'ma laugh at everyone who hated. Remember getting faded, then I remember all them times I faded. Why he saucing me, ain't no sorry that I tolerated. I was in the set, I lost 2 niggas and my cousin. My little dog be wildin' really cause it came from nothing. All they know is that they see a art, they gon' start bustin'. All they know.
So as you guys can see right here, these two options of transformers are amazing because it kind of glues the lead vocal and the background vocal together. I know you hear it, you know, everything just sounds way more cohesive and just like, it sounds like a more of a song without having to use any EQ or anything like that. So the T-Rack Saturator is a great way to, you know, just not change the frequency balance, but to change just the overall way that everything is interacting together. That's why we love collective harmonic distortion. That's why we love analog gear, because it just changed the way everything interacts in a song. So the next thing that we have right here is I love having my T-Rack Saturator coming down to my effects. All of my effects, reverb, everything's getting sent right here, right? And just listen to the way the solid state components adds more transparency to the overall effects. You can hear the reverb and everything so much better when you have the a solid state type of a thing going on, you know.
Wanna put my problem to the ceiling. Stay for everyone and then fuck all they feeling. With my money at with bills, tell her that I got it. Pull up in a brand new Benz, difference is I bought it. Niggas say I'm overrated, overestimated. Damn, bro, if I make it, I'ma laugh at everyone who hated. Remember getting faded, then I remember all them times I faded. Why he saucing me, ain't no sorry that I tolerated. I was in the set, I lost 2 niggas and my cousin. My little dog be wildin' really cause it came from nothing. All they know is that they see a art, they gon' start bustin'. All they know is robbing, doing fraud, forever thuggin'. Why it can't stay the same? Got a lot on my brain. Things gotta change. Why it can't stay the same? Got a lot on my brain. Thuggin', why do things gotta change? Why it can't stay the same? Got a lot on my brain.
Just listen to how that very intimate moment right there, where the artist who is one of my very good friends, right, lifelong friends, J-Mac, I'm gonna drop his profile down below so you can listen to more of his songs. I mix most of his records. And I love the T-Rack Saturator, right? Because just listen to how the solid state components just make everything sound more open. So you can use a saturator on the back end of that reverb and that delay to make sure that everything is more clear. You don't have to use too much reverb if you have a saturator on the back end of your effects. So you can keep that vocal dry, right? But still have more of everything. It's just due to the way that the, the component, the solid state component is handling the upper harmonics of the effects, right? So, all of these do different things. Some do even harmonics, some do odd harmonics. We're going to talk about that in another video. And the very last thing that I wanted to just say is how, you can use T-Racks in automation, right? So I didn't do it on this song, but I love to automate my saturator. Sometimes as the verse is progressing, I like to drive it a little bit more harder. So it's giving some more momentum and more, kind of like how real life is, people don't keep the same tone when they're talking to you and having a conversation. Sometimes it could go up and sometimes it could go down. So that's what you always got to think about too, automating that, bringing that into the music, right? And what I did right here is I used the CLA 76, right? Pay attention on this part. It was bluey. I had a vision when I heard that intimate part. I thought of a star in the night sky. So that's why I picked the bluey. And on my lead vocal, I had the blackie, right? So I'm giving contrast between the overall leads and that specific part right there. Sometimes I might automate it between the bluey and the blackie. I might have the bluey in the hook, and then when the verse comes in, I switched it on them. They don't even know, but I switched it on them for the blackie. So now the verse got them vibing, but when the hook come in, bam, all of this energy. So I just want to say thanks a lot for being a great part of my YouTube family. If you guys do have any more comments, questions, or any ideas for content down below, please let me know. I appreciate you guys. Just want to say thanks a lot for being a great part of my YouTube family.
I'm in prison waking up with constant blue and white. I was living reckless, never was I living life. I was smoking gas, now they got me smoking spice. Time, never do it seem to count. Why? Cover loss cannot be found. Stress, let it get the best of me. I done lost 3 people in a year, I'm screaming rest in peace. I just wanna put my problem to the ceiling. Stay for everyone and then fuck all they feeling. Where my money at with bills, tell her that I got it. Pull up in a brand new Benz, difference is I bought it. Niggas say I'm overrated, overestimated. Damn bro, if I make it, I'ma laugh at everyone who hated. Remember getting faded, then I remember all them times I faded. Why he saucing me, ain't no sorry, that not tolerated. I was in the set, I lost 2 niggas and my cousin. My little dog be wildin' really cause they came from nothing. All they know is that they see a art, they gon' start bustin'. All they know is robbing, doing fraud, forever thuggin', yeah. Why do things gotta change? Why it can't stay the same? Got a lot on my brain. Close your eyes and use your head and it's gon' be alright. I'm in prison waking up with constant blue and white. I was living reckless, never was I living life. I was smoking gas, now they got me smoking spice. Time, never do it seem to count. Why? Cover loss cannot be found. Stress, let it get the best of me. I done lost 3 people in a year, I'm screaming rest in peace.